Right, good morning, welcome back. Now for the second video in this short series of 3, I'm going to do something with a slave cylinder. On the Hayabusas, the clutch slave cylinder flexes on its mounting, quite simply because it's only mounted to the cover for the sprocket. That flimsy, soft pot metal cover that they cover up the front sprocket with, that's all that's holding the slave cylinder. That's all that supports it. And as you saw in the last video, I put heavyweight springs in the clutch. So the fact that they flex ordinarily from the factory anyway, it's going to flex even more now because I've got big heavy springs pushing on it. So that slave cylinder, well, it needs locking up as well. And there is available from the company that supplies the locking ring in the last video, that MH Products. They also supply a little bracing plate that holds that still and locks it up solid. But I like to check things for myself. What I'd like to know is how much it flexes by right now, and when we fitted the locking plate, how much it flexes by, if anything, afterwards. And there's a perfect way to measure it extremely accurately. I'll show you. Right, now this here is a dial gauge from my lathe. This is what we use for dialing in a piece of metal and when chucking it in the lathe to make sure it's absolutely concentric and it's not running off center. And it's a great way with that little tip of the dial gauge to see precisely how much flex there is in that slave cylinder. Just going to stand it on that little clamp there with the dial gauge tip pressing against the slave cylinder, dialed into 0 thou. Let's actually pull the clutch in and see how much that needle moves by. 8 thou of movement or flex in that slave cylinder, and that casing is flexing by 8 thou every time you pull the clutch in. Right, so there we are, 8/1000th of an inch. That gives us our datum. That gives us a flat line to start from. We'll move the apparatus out the way, and then we'll set the brace plate on. We'll fit it as per the instructions, bolt it up tight, then we'll try it again and see if the brace plate actually locks up all movement and stops it. Because when you're going to fit any performance mods to a Hayabusa, you're going to want to beef up the clutch. So it's very common. And when I bought that locking ring for the slipper mechanism, the guys at MH Products said, you might want this as well. And they also sold me this locking plate. Now, having bought it, I want to know that it was a worthy purchase. So I know it flexes by 8 thou. Let's fit it and see how much it flexes by afterwards, if anything at all. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Okay, here's the little brace plate in question. Billet aluminium, 6mm thick, and it fits in there, like that. It's got 4 bolt holes. That one, that's the pointer. That one there, the one on the slave itself, the one at the top, and this one right down inside. And it's got little spacer rods so that it spaces it out and it mounts perfectly right there and hopefully locks it up. But the first thing you can see is that it hits this steel return pipe coming off your water pump. So the coolant return pipe does have to be bent out very slightly just to allow some space for the rubber hose. It doesn't touch it there, that's fine, but the rubber hose won't go back in. So it needs to come out about 3 or 4 mil. So let's do that first. Right, let's see if it actually works. Let's set up the dial gauge. We had 0.08 of an inch of movement. See how much we've got now. Three and a half. So there we are. A shade over 3 thou of movement. That's nothing, really. Okay, 8 thou wasn't much, but it was well over twice as much. And you could physically see it flexing. When you pull the clutch in, you could actually see the slave cylinder twitch and twist, rotating slightly on its mount. Now you can't see any movement at all. Whatever flex there is now, that 3 thou, it's nothing. It's not a problem at all. I'm quite happy with that. It's a lot stiffer and more braced than it was. As you saw, a little bit tricky to fit. You've got this hose to get out of the way and just bending that pipe. That's a bit scary. It's a metal pipe, a steel pipe. It comes out of your housing of your water pump and it just needs to be relieved very slightly. It does say here in the instructions at the bottom very clearly is a special note that you may need to bend that pipe very slightly to get the hose in and get it refitted. If you do, great, but if you don't bother, because honestly, shouldn't be bending things like that if you can help it. But there it is, it all fits. A lovely job, nicely braced, and of course the other side of it is it's going to give you a crisper feel at the lever. If you've got a slave cylinder that's rotating, it's actually twisting and flexing on its mounts. When you pull the clutch in, no matter how good your hydraulic lock is, doesn't matter, it's still going to be spongy at the lever. So now it actually makes the clutch lever crisper, which is nice. And also any hydraulic unit, when you're pushing a piston out of a bore with seals around it, if it's rotating and twisting on its axis when it's doing so, it's actually going to twist and wear that bore. It's going to wear the seals quicker, so it's going to make it last longer as well. So nice little upgrade. MH products again. I got both of them from the same place at the same time. Nice little upgrade. I'll put a link in the description below. And the last video in this series of 3 on the Hayabusa is about security. How to lock your bike up in a way that I've never seen before. Completely unique, but I'll tell you all about it next time. So there we are. Thank you for watching. Take it easy, ride safe. I'll see you next time.